Welcome to RSA 2023 Broadcast Alley. We are halfway through the first day. It's a beautiful day in San Francisco. The sun is shining. Everybody's out on the street. It's like RSA is back the way it's been in years past, other than that thing that happened the last couple years ago. I'm here with Kunal Anand. He is the CTO and CISO of a little company called Imperva. Kunal, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. And it's amazing to be back here. You can feel the energy.
There is a lot of energy. It's actually palpable that so many people are back, seeing people you haven't seen in years, meeting new people. We were just meeting for the first time.
It's like summer camp, right?
Yeah, only not. That's a whole different experience.
Yes.
So, Kunal, tell us a little bit briefly about Imperva. What does Imperva do? What are you about?
Yeah, so we protect the world's critical applications and data.
Okay.
And if you kind of take a step back and you think about what's going on right now, there's this wave of modernization in enterprises.
Yes.
And people have lots of applications, they have lots of APIs, they've got lots of data. Could be on-prem, could be in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, they're trying to protect all this stuff. And what we do at Imperva is we build solutions to help these organizations do that, whether it's through web application firewalls, capabilities to protect APIs, protecting networks, protecting data at rest, data in motion. That's what we do.
Interesting. And because of all the technological advances, we don't keep our data locked in safes anymore. It's pretty much everywhere.
Data is everywhere. And I think that's, you bring up a really important thing, and I think one of the problems right now is people just don't know where their data is, and then people just don't fundamentally know what's in that data.
Right. And I've been in the industry a long time. When I started many years ago, the idea of data, everybody sort of had a sense of what sensitive data was, what critical data was, what proprietary data was. But we've created whole new ecosystems of data that didn't exist before the digital age.
Totally.
That we have to think about and protect about. I mean, how many times have you had a casual conversation and all of a sudden your phone starts popping ads for what it was you were talking about? Or not even you, somebody in the room with you type of thing.
It's terrifying when that happens.
It is.
Or like when you have
Freaks me
these
out.
remnant ads that follow you around the internet, right? Because you just viewed something. I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the fact that, 20 years ago, there was one type of database, very homogeneous, structured databases, and that evolved. Right. And so now there's, just a plethora of data store options, whether they're, structured databases, could be like the Oracles and the Microsoft SQL servers of the world,
right,
all the way down to, semi-structured, which could be these lakes and these warehouses. And that would be like the Hadoops, the Cassandras, the Mongos, all the way down to the unstructured side of things. And that would be like files that we've got really deployed everywhere. So it's funny because you talk to people and you're like, hey, do you know where all your data is? And you expect them to say, well, realistically, no, I don't really know where all my data is.
Right.
But every now and then you find these, smart CISOs who basically say, oh, we know 100% of where everything is. And that's just categorically untrue, right?
So when I started in the private sector back in the mid-90s, and the internet was kind of a new thing, and we called it internet security. We didn't have the cool cybersecurity term back then. But a lot of the conversations that we were having was just trying to convince companies, look, if you're going to connect to the internet, you're going to have to do security, you're going to have to do things. And it was amazing how many of them really didn't care. I mean, forget that they didn't understand it, but they're like, we've got a firewall, or
yeah.
I had a client one time. They're like, well, we whatever the leading brand of firewall at the time was, they'd gone out and bought it. They'd gone to the training course, and they hired. I did pen testing back in those days, vulnerability assessments, and so they hired us to try to break in. And I'm just doing some initial port scanning. And of course, back in those days, every node on the network was internet reachable, in theory, which is that's a whole different story. But I was scanning their entire network. It was like there wasn't even a firewall there. Nothing was being blocked.
Yeah.
And at some point we started talking with them and said, oh, okay, look, they actually had an incident. They were getting a DOS attack. And they, of course, were blaming us. And we're like, we're not doing anything. But let's take a time out. Let's look at your firewall rule set. And, of course, what was the final rule? Any allow. But they were very, oh yeah, we're perfect. We're well trained. We set it up right, and we know what we're doing. And then we hit we retooled and did a whole, well, let's help you build a real architecture that's really sound and doesn't have this kind of thing happen. But I mean, over the years, almost 100%, if the clients were like, oh yeah, we're good,
Yeah.
they weren't. And if the clients were like, well, we think we've done the right things, we've tried to cover all of our bases, they tended to be in pretty good shape. And those are we probably usually still got in, but it was a little bit harder, it was a little bit more challenging. You had to go into the bag of tricks a little bit more.
But you're kind of getting at this really important thing, which is intellectual honesty. And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed.
Right.
I talk to my peers, other CISOs and other CTOs, and many of them just believe that they know everything, and it's impossible to. And when you think about and you balance it with what's going on in the industry right now, obviously, maybe we'll talk about it, but everything that we see in innovation that's getting unlocked around artificial intelligence, where, I don't know if you notice it, but literally every single week, we will construct a mental model of where we think the world is going, and then every single week it flips on its head because there's some acceleration in something.
Right.
And it's crazy to see that. And now, when people come along and they're like, yeah, we know everything, you're like, we don't even know fundamentally where this whole space is going to go.
Right.
So how can you attempt to know everything? And so I think it's really important to almost bring like a beginner's mind to what we do and what we practice. And always kind of question, all those things, and just, I don't know, just be intellectually honest
Well, and
about
people
that.
like me that have been around for a long time, and most of my war stories are 25, 30 years old, if not older. I'm talking about things that are still problems today, which is depressing on one level.
Yep.
The number one way, I saw an article that we had on one of our shows maybe a month ago, but the article was put out by some IAM company, which sent me down a whole rabbit hole. When did we stop calling it authentication and authorization and started calling it IAM? And I'm like, mental note, do the research on it, because I'll guarantee it's a company's marketing team that came up with a new product to sell, and so they had to coin a new thing so they could create it shall remain nameless quadrant in a geometric shape, if you know what I'm getting at. But
How many sides to this shape are there?
but so we're here to talk about being a CISO, and I chuckle because I live in multiple worlds in this community, and in the hacker community, CISOs are just sort of more or less the laughing stock, because most of the hackers know that the CISOs don't know everything. But then you get to the more business-oriented side of things, the more vendor-driven side of things, it's catering to the CISOs. And much as I love being here, it's a prime example of how, if you don't know everything, you're susceptible to a lot of really good sales pitches. And it's like the vacuum cleaner salesman. How did I ever live without this $3,000 vacuum cleaner, and I only did the $50 vacuum cleaner up until now? How do you approach, I guess, being a CISO? How do you be humble and get to the point of realizing that you don't know everything?
I think you just start by saying, A, I don't know everything. B, there are new challenges that emerge, if not daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that might be.
Right.
And there are these sort of asymmetric approaches to solve those problems. I think it all kind of comes back to first principles thinking, which is A, identifying that there is a problem, and that is meaningful for you to solve.
Admitting that you have a problem, that type of thing?
Step number one.
Okay.
Absolutely. But also, is that problem really important for you to solve? Right? I could rattle off what my risk register looks like today,
Right.
but that risk register is important to me, may not be important to you.
Right.
And vice versa.
Right.
So number one, quantifying your risk. And then really thinking about, how do you prioritize it? And when I think about the risk register, I think about it in terms of, what is the likelihood? And then what is the potential impact? So looking at it from two axes. And then figuring out where that plots.
Right.
And then really targeting those key critical things. And then the goal being, how do you track and how do you bring that risk down? And so I don't think about a vendor technology, or I don't think about a buzzword. I think more about, here's my holistic issue, which could be, let's say, sensitive data management, or a holistic issue may be, governance of some type across a cloud-based environment. Okay, this is what I want to accomplish.
Right.
if I don't do this, what's my negative behavior, or what's the negative outcome? And then how can I either, before I even go to the market and think about what else is there, what do we want to do? Do I have the right resources? Do I have the right investment to get that stuff done? Because one of the traps that we always see is people will invest in a lot of different areas and a lot of different programs.
Sure.
But and I know, and 2020 to 2022 were years of excess. And a lot of companies just invested in a lot of different technologies. 2023 and beyond, people want to do more with what they have.
There's a tad bit of tight belting going on.
100%. Compression.
Right now.
There is compression.
Yeah, it's that expansion and contraction type.
And the sort of look now of people saying, there may be best of breed, but I'm looking at sort of best of platform. And so I'm not hearing actually do more with less. I'm hearing I want to do less with less.
Right.
That's a real common phrase.
Absolutely. Yeah, I went to a talk several years ago that a friend of mine was giving, and he started out by asking the audience, how many people have enough money in your security budget? And everybody's like chuckling and laughing. And I'm like, everybody should be raising their hand, because whatever they have in their budget, that's what they have to work with. Yeah. So you better pretty darn well figure out what to do with it.
It's the envelope.
Yeah.
Right, it's the envelope. And you can only spend so many dollars. So,
yep.
I don't get caught up in the buzz. I don't get caught up in any of those things. I know what my problems are. I know what I need to focus on. And then I try to rationalize. And if I don't have resources or bodies to go and, deal with something, then why would I make an investment? I'm just setting myself up for failure.
I mean, I know it's a rhetorical question, but I think part of the problem of our industry, without being able to find cause, but there's certainly a perception. There's a need for automation, but I think there's a perception that there's a solution out there for everything. There's a technology, there's a tool that we can set it and forget it. I mean, it's been like that for the almost 30 years that I've been in the private sector. Just don't explain to me that I have to think about things like risk and identifying and setting up processes. Just tell me what I need to buy, how many do I need, where do they need to be, and what color is the light supposed to be, and what do I do if it starts blinking red?
Yeah.
And that's about it, and that's the extent of the mentality. I've been doing compliance for many years, and what I love about the particular thing, the branch of compliance I do, is it's forced companies to do something, even though they don't like it, they don't understand it, but they can't engage in commerce unless they're doing this one particular compliance standard. That if you're a regular on the show, I do PCI. And that's the time of the show where everybody would have to take a drink at the drinking game.
We're taking shots now?
Well, soon. It's getting late into the day. It's almost 5 o'clock here. So, I mean, what do you recommend to people that either are CISOs and want to be better, or, God forbid, there's people out there that aspire to be a CISO?
I would say several things. So I have not been, my arc was, I never wanted to be a CISO. Like, my career has always stemmed from technology.
Right.
So been in the CTO space, serving as CTO for a while, and before that I was very curious. So engineering, IT infrastructure, and security became interesting to me 20 years ago. And it's always been something that, I don't know, the mind works the way that it wants to.
Right.
And I've always been attracted to this idea of the attackers have an infinite amount of time to prepare an attack.
Yep.
And we have, sub-second to respond. So that sort of incongruity, how do you balance that? And how do you deal with that? So I'm really attracted to that. But I think from people that are looking at the space that want to be a CISO, think with first principles. Think with, here are areas where we could do better, where we should be doing better. Here is the risk to the broader organization. So don't look at it just purely from a technology perspective, because it's easy to do that. Or don't look at it from like an acronym.
Oh, that's the other problem, because it's not a technology problem.
I agree with you.
Technology is the problem.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think we have an opportunity to really strip a lot of that excess away.
I sure hope so.
Oh, we do. And I think we're going to see it.
We've made very little large measurable progress in the grand scheme of things in the last 30 years.
The belt tightening that we alluded to, that compression that we see in the market, that will absolutely shake out what is truly necessary and versus what is excess, what is something that it's a nice to have versus a must have. We're going to see that.
Great. Well, it's been a privilege to meet you and talk to you a little bit. We could certainly talk about this for hours, but thank you for your time. If you want to find out more about Imperva and aspire to be a CISO, go to securityweekly.com/Imperva, IMPERVA RSAC. That's going to do it for us. Thank you.